Former Secretary of State Don Rumsfeld, of course, the Secretary of State under the Bush administration, has died. He has passed away from natural causes. His family has released a statement in regard to his death. And while some may feel that it is not appropriate to say negative things about individuals upon their passing, I am not in any way interested in lying to my audience about what Don Rumsfeld stood for, how he helped to craft a narrative that encouraged Americans to support two incredibly disastrous wars, and his role in what was referred to as enhanced interrogation, when in reality it was nothing more than brutal torture of detainees. So let me give you the details. Let's do the obit. Let's talk about who Don Rumsfeld was. Rumsfeld was known for his unwavering support for the US invasion of Iraq following September 11th, the use of so-called enhanced interrogation techniques, aka torture, and of course prisoner abuse scandal at Abu Ghraib. That was a massive scandal at the time. Those photos are absolutely hideous. I mean, there were photos of the degrading, demeaning treatment of the detainees in Abu Ghraib. It was a giant scandal at the time, and I'm honestly curious whether it would be considered a scandal if it were to happen today, considering how much things have devolved, not only domestically, but even when it comes to foreign policy. I mean, the Bush years were absolutely awful when it came to foreign policy, but the Obama administration came in and essentially conducted a continuation of Bush era foreign policies, and even expanded the use of drone strikes when it comes to the war in the Middle East. So just something to keep in mind as we give you the details. So despite the fact that Al-Qaeda was in Afghanistan, Rumsfeld proposed military action against Iraq just 4 days after September 11th. And that's according to Robert Draper's book, To Start a War. Now, that was one of the most frustrating parts of the Bush era, because the American people were bamboozled. They were lied to. So many were under the assumption that Saddam Hussein and Iraq had something to do with September 11th. What Don Rumsfeld did was he saw this tragic event in the United States where thousands of Americans died. He saw that as an opportunity to manufacture consent for a war that we should not have started. And he started that war by arguing that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. 10 years ago, ABC News interviewed him and asked him about that very statement and how it actually ended up not being true at all. Let's watch.
You believed absolutely, categorically, Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction?
I don't do a lot of things categorically. Anyone who's been around intelligence gathering knows that it can be wrong. I mean, Colin Powell's been around for longer than anybody in terms of.
He said he was devastated.
Of course he was, everyone was. But my Lord, he's the guy who had more experience than anyone else. He worked hard with George Tenet, with Condi Rice, he prepared his speech, he went up to the UN, he made his case, and he wasn't lying. The idea that he was lying or duped is nonsense. He believed it. Our military believed it. Our military got chemical weapon suits on to protect them.
But you were wrong.
Oh my goodness, the intelligence was certainly wrong.
If you had known he did not have them.
I didn't know.
If you had.
I didn't.
If you had.
I have no idea. I have no idea. What you know today can help you on things you're thinking about tomorrow. It can't help you with things you were thinking about back then. Back then, there was reasonable confidence that he had these weapons.
The argument that there was reasonable confidence that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq isn't good enough, because at the time, there were members of the intelligence community that questioned the narrative of weapons of mass destruction. But those concerns, anything that conflicted with the narrative that the Bush administration was trying to craft, was ignored, was absolutely neglected, ignored, brushed to the side. And we, at that moment in the United States, decided to do a preemptive war in 2003. That preemptive war has been a disaster, as we know. We've spent trillions of dollars, not just in Iraq, but also in Afghanistan. Again, enhanced interrogation methods that were used when it came to detainees related to those conflicts, absolutely brutal and horrifying. I mean, we broke all sorts of international laws, conducted war crimes. I mean, the Bush administration also conducted warrantless surveillance and spying on Americans. Just absolutely awful, absolutely awful. Look, you read these obituaries when government officials pass away, and I get it, they talk about how many children they had and how wonderful they were to their families. But what about the families who lost their children as a result of these drone strikes? Or what about the families whose homes and neighborhoods were destroyed, their livelihoods were destroyed, their way of life was destroyed thanks to the Bush administration, thanks to the help of Secretary of State Donald Rumsfeld, and again, manufacturing consent for a war that we should not have been in. He famously, by the way, offered rosy assessments of how the war in Iraq would proceed and offered little introspection for the ensuing tragedy and fallout. The Gulf War in the 1990s lasted 5 days on the ground. I can tell you, if the use of force in Iraq today would last 5 days or 5 weeks or 5 months, he said, but it certainly isn't going to last any longer than that, he predicted in 2002. So he intentionally underestimated the impact of starting that preemptive war. He made decisions along with other Bush administration officials based on incredibly faulty intel, didn't even want to wait to verify that intelligence regarding weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And so this is it, this is his legacy. It doesn't just go away because he's died of natural causes. And he died at a pretty old age, he lived a long life. In November of 2002, Rumsfeld also signed off on the Department of Defense's use of tactics against detainees in Guantanamo Bay, which by the way remains open, that included deprivation of light, forcible stripping, the use of phobias such as dogs and stress positions for up to 4 hours. Along with his signature, he wrote a note saying, quote, "I stand for 8 to 10 hours a day. Why is standing limited to 4 hours?" And mind you, these are detainees who, many of whom, hadn't even been charged with anything yet. Okay, there are some detainees in Guantanamo Bay right now as we speak who are actually innocent, have not been charged of anything. The US government acknowledges that they're innocent, but they're still detained because we created a problem and we don't know how to end it. We don't know what to do with these detainees who, I would argue, understandably, are furious at what the United States has done to them. So we can't lie about the massive role that Donald Rumsfeld played in these awful foreign policy decisions that are still impacting the people of Iraq and Afghanistan today, and certainly are impacting Americans, as so much of our finite resources go toward conflicts that we should have never been in the first place. Want to read a statement from the family of Donald Rumsfeld, and then we'll wrap this up. They write, "It is with deep sadness that we share the news of the passing of Donald Rumsfeld, an American statesman and devoted husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. At 88, he was surrounded by family in his beloved home in New Mexico." So you can read the rest for yourselves. I wanted to offer my condolences to his family because regardless of how I feel about Don Rumsfeld, I'm sure that his family loved him and I'm sure that today is a difficult day for them. But we should also be considerate of the endless difficult days that people in the Middle East have suffered as a result of decisions made by our government, especially when Don Rumsfeld was Secretary of State.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.